Hello.
Hello. How you
Hi.
doing?
Good.
Can you
Wow,
see
this is,
me?
I can.
Okay, excellent.
Never used this.
Yeah, I've only
Yeah.
done it once before, so yeah. What's going on for you? What are you up to at the moment?
Yeah, what's going on for me? I am
Mm-hmm.
currently in rehearsals for another production of Life of Pi that goes to China, Taiwan, and Macau. Yeah, so they're rehearsing in London. So we have a 7-week process, and then they get on the road in China, get on the plane, and then
Okay.
go on the road.
And are you in that?
No.
No, so what's your role in it?
So my role is the Global Associate Director for Puppetry and Movement. So I sort of set up the shows and then look after them remotely. And then another
Okay.
team looks after the show on the ground. That used to be me. And I
Okay.
also used to perform in it as well. But now I've stepped away from that side of things so that I can kind of manage multiple productions at the same time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. What does looking after it remotely look like?
So it basically is a consulting role.
Okay.
So I will read the performance reports
Mm-hmm.
and anything that sort of flags up, I'll, contact the relevant department to try and solve the problem or ask a question. And then I sort of take calls about mainly from the resident directors who
Okay.
are the team on the ground who run it day to day, along with company managers and stage managers, for advice on what to do in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
Usually situations like
Okay.
illness and personal days and injuries and people's personal lives, all sorts of things can happen. So
Mm-hmm.
the American tour, for example, obviously America's such a big place that
Mm-hmm.
the knock-on effect of them having to travel so far for those things sometimes means a different answer for them than it would be in the UK, where all the cities are really close together.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, just sort of advice really and consultation. And I'd also kind of oversee any cast changes and things that happen if we're bringing somebody new into the show. So
Okay.
it's basically,
Wow. How long were you in Life of Pi when you were performing in it?
I was in all for about 2 years,
Okay.
with a little gap in the middle when we transferred
Okay.
the show from London to New York. There was a little bit of a
Okay.
gap, and then we set it up there. Well, first in Boston, actually, we did a sort of quite a luxurious out of town tryout that was long.
Okay.
And yeah, so we had a fairly long run in Boston, and then we transferred it into New York.
Okay.
Yeah, so about 2 years.
Wow. Great. And what else? So you said that you're doing it so that you can work on is that to work on other Life of Pi projects at the same time, or other projects? You kind of opening yourself up so that you can consult on that and then do other things at the same time.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to do that now. Finn Caldwell, who I work with a lot, who originated the puppetry on Life of Pi, he and I are developing a couple of projects together. Can't actually say what they are now, but we make a lot of work together with all of our sort of associates, past and future, really. We're
Mm-hmm.
sort of gathering a team of people who create work like we do in the land of movement and puppetry, and we're sort of building a big team of people who we can make shows with.
Okay.
It's a lot. It's a very, very creative process, which is the reason I've been sort of really wanting to get back to that,
Mm-hmm.
because there is something really unique about it in the very, very early stages of development. So it's my favorite time.
Which exactly is your favorite time? So development time?
Yeah, the development
Yeah.
time, the creating of it,
Okay.
Yeah, the R&D stage, and then sort of building the show. And then obviously there's another little bonus amazing time, which is, teching it in and sort of seeing it all come together with the technical elements is obviously also amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the kind of creation of it and the sparking of ideas and sort of making something with nothing is
Mm-hmm.
what I really like, and I feel like that's where creativity really lies, is when you just have an open space and nothing, and a bunch of wonderful creative people bounce ideas off each other, and it's just the best.
Yeah, I feel the same. When I moved from performing into the creative side, or at least when I moved from performing into focusing onto the creative side, and then ended up just sort of staying in the creative side and not really performing anymore, it was because I realized that I loved the creative process, and actually the performance itself, for me, I was like, actually, I'm okay letting go of that bit and doing the act, just spending more time on the development time, and then finish developing, let that fly, and then like go and develop another. Yeah. So when you say you love it when you come in and there's just like you're starting from scratch, do you mean like no theme, no story, nothing? You literally come in and go, what are we going to make?
I haven't actually done a huge amount of that work.
Okay.
There is one glorious person who does a lot of that, who is a director, who you absolutely should talk to. He's also a movement director.
Who's that?
His name's Sam Rayner.
Okay.
He sort of does a lot of things, but he runs a process quite like that, where he sort of is like, what's the stimulus? Don't know. He might come in with a very, very loose idea, but he has worked with a number of wonderful artists who just sort of make things out of nothing. I haven't had a huge amount of experience of that. I sort of dream of it, but I pretty much always have a some sort of source material or stimulus of some kind. So a lot of the projects I'm developing now sort of exist as a story anyway.
Yeah.
But in terms of the building blocks of those things, they're sort of invented by us in terms of how we portray those things. Do we use movement? Do we use special effects? Do we use puppetry? Music and sound. I love working with music. So yeah, in terms of the answer to how to put that story onto stage, I guess, is what we're coming up with. But yes, I pretty much always have a story of some kind. So far, anyway. I'll advance to the world where you arrive in an empty space with zero things.
I already find it scary because I similarly, I like to have a story or have something that I'm like wanting to bring to life. And I find it scary enough when I come in and I'm like, I don't want to plan it. I just want to come in and figure it out with the people. And that's scary enough because it's like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen?
Yeah.
And not always something does, obviously. But yeah, I have had a few times of there is nothing and let's see what happens. But I find that even more terrifying because I'm just like, yeah, I like having the narrative and all the themes or the things that I'm passionate about. I guess even if I had a theme maybe, or like, yeah, but some sort of source material I find is useful. When you say about coming in and then using the different building blocks, what are the sorts of things that you like doing? Like the kind of games or tools, or like, do you have specific ones that you really enjoy doing or that you bring?
Yeah, that's a good question. The tools that I like using is always come from sort of physical conditioning / physical sort of language, learning a language together.
Okay.
And usually in a rehearsal process, I'll sort of build up that shorthand language so we can start communicating very efficiently when we're making things. So yeah, a lot of the work that I do requires a lot of physical strength, and so I kind of hook in with exercise that is actually physical exercise, but also with a sort of focus on movement quality and sort of economy. I do a lot of sort of economy of movement stuff.
Okay.
But sometimes if I'm working with puppets that are heavy, you need to have some sort of decent level of conditioning to be able to work with that specific thing. I think some people think that if they go to the gym for 6 weeks before they start rehearsal, then they'll be strong enough. But actually, it's really impossible to condition for the thing without doing the thing. Yeah, it's a little bit like if somebody was to go horse riding and they've never done it before and they kind of feel sore in all sorts of ways that they didn't think they would, because it uses quite a unique set of muscles. And same as a lot of the work that I do. So I kind of like to train people on the job to sort of have, I guess, a discipline. I've always really loved how dance companies work and how they take class together and they warm up together, and there is there's a real discipline and kind of like accountability, sort of conscientiousness that comes from that. And I feel if you're making ensemble theatre, to kind of have a togetherness and a unity that comes from moving together and starting the day moving together in like a sort of controlled environment, like taking class, is a really nice community building experience, and you get a good amount of conditioning from it as well. So that's the sort of physical work that I like to do. Physical kind of movement games that I like to do is, shall I tell you about the actual exercise?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Is a game that's probably been invented by someone else, because, you know, there's no new ideas. But it's a game I call Tables and Chairs, which is like a game that helps with moving transitions in shows. If you ever come on a move set, or have to take off a jacket off another actor or something in a way that is stylized within the world of the show. I sort of have a think about the movement quality of the show and the world that we're trying to build, and just set up usually chairs and then moving on to larger things like tables in the space. And the cast sort of are in two or three groups, and they enter the space together, arrive at the object together, manipulate the object in some way, either moving it from one place to another, or sort of crossing it in the space with another object or two, arriving at that destination together with the other pair, and then leaving the space together. So you're kind of using your breath and your peripheral vision and your sort of all six of your senses to have that ensemble movement. And then you can kind of pump up the dynamics a little bit, and then you get into a lot of the puppetry principles, talking about breath and peripheral vision, all of those things, which is kind of that spider senses kind of thing that you have to try and engage, where you really open up your awareness to not only the thing that you're doing, but the thing that your partner that you're moving this chair with is doing, and then the two other people that are moving a different chair, and then sort of the rest of the world around you, and then the audience. So that expansion of awareness physically with that spider senses sort of feeling is something I really like getting in straight away. So yeah, that's an example of a movement kind of exercise that I'd follow on from warming up together.
Okay, so
yeah,
can I ask a question about it?
Yeah.
So is it two objects, like two chairs, for example, and two groups come in and they get the two chairs and then they move them and then they put them down at the same time and then they exit? Is that the idea of the start of it? Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd start with two objects and then you'd have three. And you, depending on how big your company is, you can sort of have as many things as you want. But you start with one person entering the space, arriving at the object, moving it, exiting. But there could be two or three of them, so they're sort of in lines, entering, moving the thing, exiting. And then you advance it by having two people enter at the same time, going for the same object, having to move that object in space and then exit. But if you've got a large company, you might have sort of up to 5 queues of people on each side. So you've got 5 people on each side, all entering the space, going to 5 different objects, moving those objects. They could be crossing the space with one another, landing the objects and exiting. So it can get quite fun, especially if you're working with a large amount of people, because obviously your awareness has to be bigger and bigger. And then I sometimes advance it again by putting them into 3. If there's a large object, like a big table, it takes 3 people to move it. I'd have 3 people join. And so you sort of end up kind of, if I want to put a puppet in that show that is operated by 5 or 6 people, I want those 5 or 6 people to be able to move objects together at least before they go into the puppet and start trying to work with something that then becomes incredibly technical. So yeah, it's good to kind of build that team kind of awareness and space for one another, you know. But then after that, I quite like to add music as well. And Life of Pi has a lot of music in it, and it's actually fully underscored. Andrew T. Mackay wrote the score, who is incredible, and he wrote it for the piece. So he was in the room creating the music as the piece was being created. So it really goes, and often audience members are like, the music was so perfect for it, wasn't it? Thinking that it was already composed before, but it was made for the actual piece. And so I now use more and more music in those kinds of exercises, because I think it really does help sort of with the energy that you're trying to create in the room. But it also means that people can't rely on their hearing, because often in those group exercises, you can hear people kind of shuffling about, or you can hear people picking up the chair. So you can sort of use that to know, okay, now is the time to pick up the chair because I'm hearing them pick up the chair. But as soon as you have lots of music, you have to take that away. So then you have to use your other senses to be together.
When did you come up with that as a exercise?
I came up with that. And again, if anyone listens to this and is like, that's my exercise. I think I came up with that when I did the first cast change for Life of Pi in London. I was realising, having been in it already for a while, I was realising that the transitions in the show are just as important as everything else. And actually, you could do the most exquisite sequence of puppetry, but if the transition following that is clunky, that's the thing that we're going to really see. And one of the big things about transitions that, Finn likes to say is that they really should be kind of creating the world, but be so seamless that we barely notice. It's almost an illusion, really. Mm-hmm. It's not something we're trying to hide like you might in a magic trick. We're sort of transforming the audience without them even really knowing. And the only way for us to do that successfully is to adopt a sort of unified movement quality and control, and sort of be invested in the same energy. And that's when it's really magic. So yeah, I started working a lot on that. And I also realized that in shows like Life of Pi, one of the brilliant things about it is everyone does everything. Everyone is an actor and everyone is a puppeteer. And yes, there are some people that do a significant amount of puppetry and some that do a little amount, but there is no sort of small or insignificant moment. Everything kind of is just as important as the next thing. And everybody also arrives in the space with various backgrounds. Some people have worked a lot in film and television. Some people have done circus, or there are some musicians. And so you've got this whole range of skills, from acting to musical theatre to dancing to doing backflips, that you sort of think, actually, we all need to go back down to the ground again to grow this together as a community, and make sure that what we're doing is inclusive. And that is also another big part of the show that I love, is that everyone is involved. No one sat in their dressing room, let's put it that way.
Yeah. I like her. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm going to have to find an opportunity to see it. Is there a version online anywhere to stream it, or no?
No, they are. They did film it for National Theatre at Home. So I think it's been in the cinemas, and I think that they're rolling it out again soon. And I think it's also going to be on NT at Home if you have a subscription.
So I feel like I could talk to you for hours about all the things that you're saying, but some of the things that you said take me into some of the questions I want to ask about training and where all these people that you're working with are coming from. So you've already said they're coming from all different kind of worlds and places. So one of my questions is, because the students I work with are really interested in post-secondary education that can take them into that kind of like movement, devising, musical, like the world that has a bit of like total theatre kind of stuff. Yeah. And they're all asking me like, where should I go? And I'm like, to be honest, I don't know, because I said this in the last video, but I don't feel like I trained in what I ended up doing.
100%. Yeah. Same.
Like, where did you train?
I trained first at Bodywork Dance Company and then at Guildford to do musical theatre.
Okay. And did you find at Guildford, how much of what you did at Guildford do you feel like you've taken with you, like, and that applies now in the way that you work?
In the way that I work, I'd say not an awful lot. I'd say the contemporary dance aspect is still a big part of my practice. Mm-hmm. And the sort of partner work aspect is still a big part, although through a very different lens now, because I do sort of more physical theatre, lifting, work rather than dance partner work. But I suppose there are principles there that cross over. So I would say that kind of exists for me. We didn't do a lot of creative devising, and I think that's the thing that I kind of do most of now. And I am noticing that I run in audition processes that I run or I observe. Devising is a big part of it, and teamwork is a big part of it. especially because you're looking for people who can work in teams. And I think a lot of drama school training, you do a lot of solo work, especially in musical theatre. You prepare your songs and, on the whole, you sing alone. Maybe if you did a showcase, you'd have a duet maybe, or a solo. But yeah, there's sort of ensemble dance pieces in choreography in those numbers. And I guess that's group work, but not really in the way that's as sensitive as physical theatre group work was about. I mean, they're just totally different. Even in performance, I feel like I had to really get out of this kind of performance and go kind of hear a bit more within, so that I could see and listen better.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're really outwardly performing all the time, you can't listen as well to the kind of more sensitive things, more subtle things, I guess. So a lot of nuance isn't very easily achieved in that type of performance.
Yeah. So in your audition processes, you have a lot of the devising and ensemble explorations. Do you notice the people that you end up hiring or bringing in, or people that you feel like are connected in that? Do you notice that they're coming from certain establishments of training, or is it just completely varied?
It is really varied, actually. And it also goes through different stages as well. There was a stage a couple of years ago where loads of people were coming out of East 15 Drama School. For whatever reason, it was just their time. And then there's definitely been a phase where loads of people were coming out of Guildford. It was a sort of Central School of Speech and Drama phase. They have a course there that's creative collaborative devising that is just on that. So there was a lot of influx of students from that course, and that was a whole sort of generation of people who work in my field who I know a lot of and work a lot with. But yeah, nowadays it's a little bit more varied, and actually there's lots of people who come through who haven't been to drama school as well.
Really?
Yeah.
So what path have they taken?
Some of them have taken sort of a youth theatre and university degree, then either coming straight into the world or trying to do some sort of master's in acting or film or television or whatever they want to do. Some people have come through who've had completely different careers before and trained as a teacher or a lawyer even. Yeah, there was an auditionee I had a couple of rounds ago, who was a lawyer, trained in law, and then decided actually really theatre is always where my heart was, and then did an MA, and then I think he's like starting his career at 38 or something.
Okay.
So all sorts.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. It's really cool. Yeah, some people just come up through like A-level and just decide that they're ready. And for some shows, they might be. It really is a wild game.
In that way, because when I graduated a long time ago, it felt like the way you got agents often, not always, but often the way you got agents was through drama schools, and then having that named drama school on your CV was like your door in. Do you think something has changed in the way things are cast or the way the industry is working that means that's not as necessary now then, in terms of people coming from all these different angles? Or do you think it's still similar?
I think there's potentially a number of things happening. There's more drama schools now than there used to be. There used to be a very small pool of drama schools that were accredited. And if you didn't go there, you sort of didn't go anywhere. But now there's sort of like quite a lot of other drama schools popping up that I knew that I haven't heard of. Like LSMT came about, and then MTA, I think, came about, and then Identity came about. And there's sort of loads of other kind of training establishments that aren't necessarily based on the same model. I'm not sure how they work financially, mind, because I'm not sure if they're supported by the university. So I don't know whether students can still apply for student loans or whether they're paying a lot of money to go there. I'm unsure about that because they don't have scholarships in the way that we used to either. I went to drama school on a scholarship and I think they don't exist anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I could have done it without.
So
Okay.
I think that model has changed. The sort of scholarship model has changed. But in that, universities are now verifying drama schools. So they are affiliated. So you get a BA and you can get a student loan. And actually, you could always get a BA because I got a BA, yeah. But you can get a student loan, more importantly. So it's much more accessible now. So that sort of happened. And with that, it sort of changed it's slowly changing the training, I think, and the way that it works, because it's now sort of the universities are kind of in looking at the structure. And so I think that the sort of syllabus is different, much different to how it was when we were there.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be having an effect. I think there's now also more agents than there ever was.
Really?
And they, again, used to be kind of like a selection of agents that were reputable. Then sort of a lot more kind of smaller agencies, boutique agencies started coming through. And now there's loads of agents. And so I think it's potentially people have more of a chance of getting an agent now. Whether they work well for them, I don't really know. But I feel like there's just sort of more of everything. There's more schools, more students, there's more agents. The only thing there isn't more of is jobs. So
yeah.
So I think that has the greatest impact on sort of casting, but you know, I think we're really in a flux at the moment, because I'm now seeing more people from more backgrounds, from more different skill sets, a greater age range than sort of ever before, really. So there's a huge amount of great things happening in that as well, because it did used to be a very small amount of people doing a small amount of jobs, and so therefore little opportunity to grow and let more people in, because the gates were so closed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels a little bit more wild and a little bit more scary, but
Okay.
there's also great things coming from that. So that's what I'm really enjoying from a casting point of view.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I think so. Yeah. But yeah, people, honestly, I'm really surprised sometimes with the people that I end up casting for projects, because some of them, I mean, I'm working with a woman at the moment who hasn't even graduated, and they're letting her graduate early. And she has absolutely no experience, personality-wise and energy-wise, and kind of just the essence of her is absolutely perfect. And so it's kind of trumps anything else in terms of how much experience you've got. And it's just sort of like the right job at the right time in her life. And those things are quite serendipitous, I think. A lot of it is luck, of course. And I honestly just really, I choose people based on how I feel about them in the room, and whether I think it's going to be enjoyable to spend 6 weeks in the room with them, and whether I think they're going to be enjoyable to work with for 6 weeks, or even a year, tour together. And I feel like a big part of my job is to get them there, and they're coming in with an openness and potential. And if they're ready to learn and they're ready to work hard, then I'll get them there. And other people who come into the show who have a lot more experience than them also then provide, leadership and inspiration too.
Yeah. Great. So if people weren't going to go down the sort of drama school route, what do you think are really useful trainings or practices or tools or workshops people should be seeking out?
I think that the most valuable thing is to watch others make work. That's what I've always loved doing. I've loved observing other people. I sometimes ask just to be in the room when people I know are casting other shows that I'm interested in, just to see what their process is, what kind of people they end up working with. I really like sitting in other people's rehearsal rooms. I always run an open rehearsal room for any students that want to come in. I had one today, visit who's a theatre student. I think that's an incredibly useful tool if you don't want to, or it's not available to you, either geographically or otherwise, to go to drama school, because there's a huge amount that you can learn just by being in it. being in the environment. And if you haven't got a job yet to be able to learn on the job, then try and get yourself in a position to observe other people doing the job. And they will tell you a lot about what you need to know, even from just how to behave in a rehearsal room, like how to show up for the show and the rest of your cast and your director and everybody there. And I think you can learn a lot from watching. So that I would say is invaluable. And I think there are a huge amount of directors and theatre makers out there that will gladly welcome young people into their room, not necessarily young people, students into their room. So yeah, that's what I would really encourage. I would also, if they want to get into movement work, is to carry on taking class regularly. Try taking class with a sort of selection of teachers and instructors. And sort of like different levels. I would also encourage like a really good animal flow practice. It's really useful for the work that I do. And I know also a lot of other practitioners who use that work and the sort of principles of that work. That's all I can think of really at the moment. I'm sure more things will come. Yeah, watching and learning and just honing your craft as much as you can until you have an opportunity to do it with other people and be paid for it.
Yeah, which is the goal.
Which is the absolute goal.
Yeah, that's great advice. When you say to do class regularly, what kinds of class do you think are really important for your type of work? I know that like there's going to be people who do similar types of work to you but might have different styles, but like for your style specifically, what kind of classes do you feel like are really important?
For me, it's always contemporary, particularly lyrical, mainly because for me personally, that's really my way into training my connection with storytelling, because I feel like there's a big narrative part of contemporary. Lots of dance, but I feel most connected to it for contemporary. I also think it's a good practice for body control and awareness of your body in the space, and contact improvisation, which is a sort of, part of contemporary, is probably the most valuable practice I have for my work, because you're then training your ability to connect physical movement with storytelling. You're training your body physically to move in a controlled and dynamic and economic and efficient and theatrical way. And you're then combining another human being in the space that you then have to listen to with your body. Listening with your body is a huge part of our practice, and contact improvisation is a great way of training that. And it's also, to sort of top it off, a really good way to understand physics of the human body as well. Especially with the lifting work that we do, it really is about understanding physics and weight, because lifting is more about technique than it is about strength. Understanding that, it sort of contact improv and contemporary sort of catches everything. So yeah, contemporary and particularly contact improv, absolutely, yeah, gold.
Okay, great. My next thing is, because I'm doing a show at the moment that involves puppets with some of my students, and some of them have never worked with puppets before. And we're doing something where it's just like a head and a hand.
Yeah.
So what would be your like top tips for people who have never worked with puppets before?
You might have never worked with puppets before, but nobody has ever worked with this puppet before. And if I'm approaching something thinking, I've been a puppeteer for 12 years, then I'm only doing myself a disservice, because I'll pick up something that I've never manipulated before and I have to learn how to use it. And yeah, I might have a shorthand, maybe. I might sort of have the type of brain that makes me think, okay, I can explore this object as it is. But if you have an open mind and an open heart, and you're ready to discover what the puppet can do first, then you get out of your own head, because sometimes people who've never done puppetry before think that a puppeteer will come along and just be able to puppeteer that. But they also will have a period of time where they have to discover it for themselves. How does it move? How does it want to move? How can I make it move? The answers come from the puppet, and it will it will inform you how it's supposed to generate feeling and character. And actually, a lot of the time, especially with slightly abstracted puppets, which is the kind of puppets you're talking about, you've got a lot of freedom there with how you want the story to go, how you want it to be created, how you want it to live, whether you want it to live in a really abstract way or whether you're trying to make an anatomically correct person in between in the space is sort of up to you. But it's a very freeing type of puppet, because if you were given a 3-person puppet of a human that is fully jointed and has loads of mechanisms and triggers, you're then completely bound by the mechanics of what that can do and how you can operate it. And actually, I come across less and less of those puppets, I think, for this reason, because sometimes if they get very, very complicated mechanically, it really strangles any kind of magic or storytelling that we can bring to it. Which is why when we start making puppets, we use prototypes that are made out of pieces of paper and rope and cardboard that are sort of really flexible and work with us so that we can kind of figure out what kind of story we want to tell. So yeah, I think approaching it with a good amount of confidence, but also approaching it with the idea that the answers are going to come from it, rather than trying to think, I have to learn it and I have to know all the answers, which just sort of produces a lot of tension and anxiety in us physically and emotionally, which is really going to strangle any sort of puppetry. That's all then we focus on is, a load of puppeteers gathering round an object, terrified about how to make it live. When actually, if you approach it by saying, how do you want to live? How do you want to be in this story? And we're also really smart. Like, if you watch something and feel something, you're there already, and you're like, it works. Sometimes when things work, I don't know why they work. It's like, I don't really know why, but I love it, And that's how we can have all of these extraordinary things that kind of don't make sense in a way, but it makes us feel things. And really, once you've done that, I think you've done the job. So yeah, I think just be open, have an open mind, open heart.
Okay, I love that. Great. When you start working with I'm going to go down the route of when you're approaching it as a performer.
Yeah.
What are the things that you do, whether it's puppeteering or you acting and performing yourself, in preparation with script work?
I don't approach scripts in the way that some drama school syllabuses say that you should approach scripts. I've never been that kind of person, because I'm quite movement led also, and sound. I've always done movement and music, and I love text, but I approach it. I read any sort of source material. So if it's an adaptation of anything, I try and read the original source first, to kind of like get any background that I can. Also, having said that, I do really like work that has been adapted from something else to be accessible to the people who don't know the original thing as well. So I read it just for background knowledge, but I don't sort of get married to it as fact. So I quite like to do that. I find reading really difficult, and I always have. So big books or like big chunks of text are quite overwhelming for me. Yeah, I've never been particularly good at it, but I still try. And I first sort of kind of, well, I suppose drama schools do tell you to do this. I kind of try and get as many clues about the character or the puppet that I'm playing, whether I'm puppeteering or acting, from the text as possible. Pulling out things that they comment on, pulling out things that other people comment on about them, which I think is as intellectual as I go with script study.
Okay.
Because I quite like to then think about the character's language from a kind of tonal and rhythmical point of view. I quite like looking at punctuation, and I quite like kind of physically thinking about the, rhythm and musicality of their speech, and then how that affects the physical body of them. And I feel like I have to try and get to the physical as quick as possible, because if I don't know how they're moving around, I can't quite know how they're talking. So yeah, I look at the text, but then I very, very quickly try and go to the body.
Okay.
And then that informs a lot about the text, because yeah, it just exists on the page unless I'm thinking about, what's kind of here, and how do I hold myself, and how do I speak, and how do I walk, how do I move about the world, which then informs, my language.
Yeah, great. So you're coming at it from much more of a physical angle, which is definitely my way as well. Although I'm finding ways to kind of blend the worlds a little bit more these days. So when you're coming at it from the physical angle, is that just an instinct thing? Are you just working from experience in the things that you're exploring? Because you talked about like rhythms and punctuation and things like that. Or are you using things like Laban tools, or like, are there any like specific things that you end up leaning towards or taking and kind of making your own? Or is it completely just like every project's different and you just find it different every time?
Yeah, I think I do find it different every time, and I didn't study Laban much. I know a little bit about it. I don't use it in practice that much. I'd say I try to access a character. I would maybe use a little bit of animal work, maybe. If I was struggling to really visualize this character, I would try and find a way in through some sort of animal work and see what kind of like fits with them and why. And I would work a little bit with tension. Those are the sort of probably the most classic recognizable tools that I would have learnt in drama school, to access the character. Where am I holding tension? Where am I holding tension? And, how do I move through the space? But yeah, technically, that's as far as I go, I think. And the rest of it is a bit more instinctive. Yeah. One of the biggest, experiences I've had, I guess, in my career is being a puppeteer has made me a better actor, because I'm more connected physically. And I'm thinking more about the detail of physics and sort of emotional states and how they affect us physically. And I sort of realized as an audience member, I was observing, I started to see when actors were really fully connected and when they were quite disembodied. And when they were sort of cut off here, or of kind of upper body and lower body, it was really hard for me to sustain sort of disbelief there. Because I sort of felt like I saw a lot of people moving around on stage who didn't really know where their body was in space, and it really affected their performances and therefore my investment in it. And it was a big lesson for me, and that's when I really kicked into that training and that understanding that everything is movement, everything.
Yeah,
and without that, you're just talking, and it would be a great radio play. But yeah, I really started to notice it, and everywhere I looked, I sort of was able to diagnose it. And that's when I knew that was my way in.
That's great. And when did you do any puppetry training at Guildford? So what was your first puppetry show?
At Warhorse.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually did it completely by accident, because I auditioned as a musician, and the musician singer who's the narrator in the show, that's what I originally auditioned for. And I went in for a couple of rounds, and they said, you're not going to get this job, but are you interested in training up to be a puppeteer? And at that point I was like, absolutely. I loved the show. I thought it was incredible. And I remember watching it. I got a £5 entry pass ticket when they did that for £5. I sat in the front row and thought it was so incredible. But yeah, I just wanted to be in it in whatever capacity. And so I had no idea. And the team that I was joining, who are two absolutely wonderful people, had already been doing the show for a while. And so I was brand new. I'd never done puppetry before. And it was my first sort of big job as well. So really scary, but learned so much. So yeah.
What would you say is the experience, whether it was a workshop or working on a show or working with an individual or something, that has been transformative for you, if there has been one, in your like journey as a performer or as a creative?
As a performer, doing Warhorse was a huge turning point for me as a person, really, and an artist. And yeah, that was a really big journey. And it sort of came at a point in my life where I was really ready to learn and sort of change the story. And I maybe didn't think I aligned with musical theatre, which is what I trained in. And so, that was a really good opportunity. And it basically changed my whole career. And it was at a point where that type of puppetry was still very new in the commercial world and new to the UK on that scale anyway. So it really sort of snowballed into amazing opportunities, because at that point there was still a fairly sort of small community of people who'd just done that show. And obviously people were really inspired. Finn Caldwell and Toby Ollier, who I've worked with a lot, and created a company. They met on that show, they created a company, and since then they have made together lots of shows, and also individually a huge amount of shows that have kind of been inspired by that. And they work with big puppets, and so yeah, it was a big shift in this type of work for a lot of people. And now and as a creative, a big transformative experience was being Finn's associate on Life of Pi, because that really was both performing in it and kind of being his associate in creating the sort of West End version, and then now looking after it. It's sort of, it's been an epic journey, and I've learned a lot about leadership and sort of honing into some more detailed puppetry work that I never thought I would kind of do. Has been hugely transformative.
Do you have time for me to ask you one more question based on what you said? You said you learned a lot about leadership. What have you learned about leadership, and what do you think is really important to bring into a room as a leader in the theatre and creative process?
I've learned a lot about how to respond to individuals. And I suppose I've sort of been thrown in the deep end of Life of Pi because it's a huge show. There's a lot of people in it, but there are shows that are bigger than that. And I think one of the biggest lessons is to learn how to run a room with enough sort of control and sensitivity and generosity to be able to have the cast believe in you as a leader, and for them to trust that you have them and you're holding them in this space, and that they're going to be okay. Because it can be scary places for some people, depending on, where you are in your life and what you've done before. Everyone also learned a lot about how individual people really are, and the different ways that people learn and different ways that people communicate. And knowing, I think being a real leader is being able to do all of those things at the same time, be able to pick people up and get them into gear with enough sort of assertiveness, and also be generous and kind enough for them to be able to come to you if they need something, and communicate with you openly and honestly. And that is a real challenge, and I'm learning every day. But to be able to change up the way that you are delivering a note, or the way that you are approaching a certain scene based on who those individuals are, that could be any combination, that all need different things. You're kind of trying to juggle 4 or 5 different types of communication, and be open enough energetically to listen and receive what they're going through or feeling at any one time, which will then kind of inform your next move. So I really like rehearsal plans, but sometimes I find that I make a plan for the day, and by 11 o'clock, it's out the window, because I have to sort of respond to what's arrived in the room that day, and still be as productive and still work towards a delivery date and all of those things that require paperwork and make the producers happy, but at the same time, keep that space really safe and held for those people so that they can do their best work.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I've learned about leadership is a lot of multitasking.
Yeah. Cool. I wanted to ask as well, because you mentioned Toby and Finn set up a company. What's that company called?
It's called Gyring Gimbal.
Okay.
They actually don't make work. They actually don't make work under that company anymore.
Okay.
They did for a number of years, and then they both just got too busy.
Okay.
So I think it was one of those situations where, and I know a lot of friends of mine who have created companies together that actually can't make work together anymore because as individual freelancers, you get money that you earn money from other jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So the sort of like the work that you make in your companies, you can't sort of survive off that. And then they were both individually getting so successful that they became too busy working on their own projects individually. But they did make some projects together that were absolutely stunning. Two in particular, if you want to look them up.
Yeah.
One that is probably one of my favourite shows of all time, called The Four Seasons, which they created a beautiful Bunraku tabletop puppetry sequence to Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which was amazing. And the other one was The Hartlepool Monkey, which was a really stunning show. A lot of excellent people in it. So yeah, if you want to research those two shows, they're absolutely brilliant. And I keep trying to bully them to bring back Four Seasons and take it on a world tour so I can do it. But yeah, they're brilliant.
Okay, great. I'll look those up. Do you know if they filmed them?
I'm not sure. I could definitely ask.
Okay.
I could definitely ask. They might be available for sort of educational use, actually, especially Hartlepool Monkey, which I think was a production with Fuel Theatre, who I know do a lot of educational things. So
okay,
yeah,
cool.
I'll ask around.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I will let you go. I actually didn't look at the notes of the questions I was going to ask you. I think I covered some things, but I just found once we started talking, some of them I remembered, and then I was like, yeah. It's so nice catching up with you. And yeah, I want to try and go and see Life of Pi. I want to hear more about the projects that you're doing, even though I know they're secret right now. So maybe when they're not secret, I'd love to know more about what you're doing. And yeah, keep in touch.
Yeah, I will definitely keep in touch. One I think will be announced fairly soon. So yeah, but once we start getting into that, we have a development in the first week of June. So yeah, and then again in November. So at some point, yeah, we can start talking about it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to chat.
Of course. Well, let me know if you come over as well, because if it's on a week or so that I'm doing an R&D, they're always in London, and come. Like, yeah, just come.
I'd love to. Okay, excellent.
Because it would be so cool to have another person in the room. You can watch or you can be in it.
Okay, I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to.
Yeah, great.
Similarly, if you end up coming this direction at any point, then let me know.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Lovely to see you.
Take care.
Thanks so much. Speak to you soon.
You too. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.